Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Layak Siddiqui, the father of all of his. Recap, parts 1 through 26. We put pattern before object. Phi is circular comparability, so only relations and differences are public. Every claim must declare type, scope, assumptions, and window. Local change is read through lifts and the carrier A equals D of phi tilde, with finite local signatures, jets. Patterns have three readable faces: cadence, texture, flow. Pattern language has limits. Domains, excisions, aliasing, and boundaries belong to identity. Local charts stitch into global structure. Winding and holonomy record global memory. Defects persist as topological facts. Identity is invariant equivalence under declared lawful transformations. Canonicalization helps comparison but does not create sameness. Persistence is certified survival through change. Null is the honest verdict when no pattern is certifiable. Direction can matter, so orientation and reversal bookkeeping, C, P, T, and the combined audit are required. Interaction is joint constraint. Composition is lawful and conditional, and failure carries information. Constraints are boundaries of co-certifiability. Equations compress those boundaries. Dynamics begins when we invert the habit. Change is lawful transformation between pattern states, and time is a derived readout of transformation order, not a primitive container. Now we rebuild the smallest word that secretly carries a whole universe. Next. Part 27. Adjacency and nextness. The first ordered relation in Phi pattern change. 1. The quiet word that smuggles a hidden timeline. Most people think the word next is harmless. Next page, next step, next moment, next day, next state. But next is dangerous in foundational work because it can reintroduce the very thing we refused in part 26, a background time conveyor belt that already knows the order of everything. If I say state B is next after state A, I might sound like I am simply describing sequence. Yet, I may be doing something much bigger without admitting it. I may be assuming that there is a universal timeline already laid down, that after is a primitive relation, that nextness comes from time itself, and that order is just what time does. Part 26 taught us to stop using time like an invisible magician. It said, change is lawful transformation between pattern states, and before and after are read from transformation ordering. So part 27 asks the question we usually skip. If time is not a primitive container, what makes something next? The answer is the core installation of this chapter. Next is not a temporal given. Next is a certified adjacency relation between pattern states under declared lawful rules. This is not a poetic statement. It is bookkeeping discipline. It tells you, do not say next until you can say why. A child-level doorway, the board game truth. The easiest way to understand adjacency is to start with games, because games are honest. They do not pretend that next comes from time. In a game, next comes from rules. The chess move. In chess, a knight sits on a square. What squares are next for the knight? Not the squares that are later in time, not the squares that are closest, not the squares that look similar. The next squares are the squares that are legally reachable in one move under the rules of chess. You can list them without a clock. You can list them without a calendar. You can list them even if you have no idea what time is, because nextness in chess is adjacency, lawful reachability. This is the first emotional shock of part 27. You already understand nextness every day without time metaphysics. You just forget you do. Why we must rebuild next instead of assuming it? If we treat next as obvious, we will constantly commit hidden errors. We will collapse multiple lawful possibilities into a single the next thing. We will treat similarity as if it implied reachability. We will confuse I learned more detail with the thing changed. We will smuggle time back in as the secret explanation of order. Part 27 refuses all of that. It says, nextness is a claim. Claims must be certifiable. So nextness must be rebuilt with the same discipline we used everywhere else. Declare the rule, declare the scope and boundaries, show lawful reachability, list branching if it exists, provide an audit path. Next becomes public only when it can be checked. The definition. Adjacency is minimal lawful reachability. We now define adjacency in the simplest language that still stays rigorous. A pattern state is a certified description bundle within scope, Part 26. Adjacency is the one-step relation connecting such states. Adjacency is the minimal lawful ordering relation between pattern states such that a declared transformation, extension, refinement, boundary update, or coupling rule connects them within scope. Let us unpack the words. Minimal means direct, no intermediate steps required for the claim you are making. Lawful means permitted under declared rules and constraints. Ordering relation means it gives direction, from source to target. Declared rule means the basis is explicit, not intuitive. Within scope means you are not silently changing what counts as the state. So the framework does not let you say B is next after A just because it feels sequential. You must say, what rule makes B reachable from A in one lawful step under these conditions within these boundaries? If you cannot answer, you have not made a public claim. You have made a habit sound like knowledge. The crucial separation. Adjacency is not similarity. One of the deepest confusions in thinking about change is to confuse nearby with next. Two states can be extremely similar and not adjacent. Two houses can look identical, but one cannot be obtained from the other in a single lawful step because the difference is structural: wiring, permits, foundation, legal constraints. Two chemical states can be similar, but a reaction barrier can make them non-adjacent under the declared conditions. Two personal moods can feel close, yet moving from one to another may require intermediate steps of sleep, conversation, healing, or time-like recovery conditions. Similarity does not guarantee direct reachability. And the reverse is also true. Two states can look very different and still be adjacent. Caterpillar to chrysalis looks like a dramatic leap, yet it is adjacent under biological transformation rules within the organism's lawful pathway. A chessboard position can look wildly different after one move, yet it is adjacent because it is legally reachable. So Part 27 installs a protective rule. Do not certify nextness by resemblance. Certify nextness by lawful reachability. This single firewall prevents many fake explanations. The 5 main types of adjacency. Next is one word, but nextness comes in different forms. If we do not name them, we will mix them up and confuse ourselves. Part 27 installs a small taxonomy, 5 main adjacency families, each with simple meaning. Type 1. Transformational adjacency. This is the most familiar type. A declared transformation rule maps one state to another. Ice state becomes water state under heat transfer conditions. Dough becomes bread under baking conditions. A chess state becomes another chess state under one legal move. A star's internal regime shifts when constraints cross a threshold. Transformational adjacency is what most people call change. But the discipline is, it is change only if the rule and conditions are declared. Type 2, scale refining adjacency. Sometimes next is not the world changing, it is us reading deeper. A blurry image becomes a sharper image when we refine resolution. A coarse measurement becomes a finer measurement when we increase instrument sensitivity. A pattern we summarized with a low depth jet becomes a richer signature when we read more local structure. This is adjacency in description depth, not necessarily adjacency in physical becoming. The world might be stable while our certified state changes because our scope or resolution changed. This prevents a common mistake, confusing epistemic refinement with ontic transformation. Type 3, overlap extension adjacency. Sometimes next means we extended the certified domain. You have a local chart of a pattern, you then stitch a new chart that overlaps, extending coverage. A map of a neighborhood becomes a map of the neighborhood plus the next district. A climate dataset expands by adding new station coverage. A biological atlas grows by adding new tissue regions. This is adjacency by lawful stitching, domain growth under compatibility conditions. Again, no primitive time is needed. The ordering comes from a lawful extension operation. Type 4, boundary-induced adjacency. Boundaries are not decoration, they shape what is possible. A pot of water reaches boiling because heat enters at the boundary. A balloon pops because boundary strength is exceeded. A contract changes behavior because a legal boundary condition changed. A cell changes state because membrane conditions allow or block transport. Here, next arises because boundary conditions changed or became active. The adjacency depends on edge rules. Type 5, coupling-driven adjacency. From part 23, interaction is joint constraint. Patterns may not be separable. When patterns are coupled, a change in one can lawfully force a change in the other. Two pendulums coupled by a shared support. One swings, the other's next state shifts. Ecosystems. Predator population changes shift prey nextness under coupling constraints. Markets. A credit boundary collapse forces correlated transitions in distant sectors. Entangled systems. The joint state has adjacency rules that do not factor into separate nexts. Coupling-driven adjacency is nextness produced by relational obligation. The rule is the coupling. Branching. A state can have more than one lawful next. People often carry an unspoken belief. There is one present and one future, like a single rail track. But real lawful systems branch. At the crossroads, both left and right are lawful next steps. In cooking, you can make soup or bread from the same pantry state. In chemistry, one reactant state may have multiple reaction pathways under different conditions. In life, one social state may lead to reconciliation, silence, conflict, or renewal depending on choices and constraints. Branching is not chaos. Branching is structured possibility. So part 27 installs a second key principle. Multiplicity of next states is lawful branching. It is not disorder. It is a certifiable structure. This matters because it changes what it means to predict. Prediction becomes map the adjacency set and its conditions, not pretend there is a single inevitable line. Branching can be narrow or wide. It can be probabilistic or conditional. But it is not a failure of science. It is part of what science must honestly represent. The everyday story that makes adjacency feel inevitable. The recipe truth. Consider baking bread again, because it is a perfect adjacency teacher. At the needed though state, what is next? Under the lawful bread pathway, the adjacent next state is let rise. But bake is not adjacent. It might be reachable later, but not in one lawful step under the bread rule set. Now notice how you know this. You do not know it because the clock told you. You know it because the transformation rules and constraints told you. This is exactly what part 27 means by rebuilding nextness. Nextness is not later. Nextness is reachable under the declared pathway rules. Time words are summaries, not foundations. 9. The cosmic story. Phases are adjacency, not timeline magic. At cosmic scale, people love timelines. First the cloud, then the star, then the remnant. But what makes star next after cloud is not a cosmic calendar. It is adjacency under constraints. Density, cooling, gravity-like coupling, or more generally, structural co-constraint, boundary conditions, and stability thresholds. A gas cloud does not become a star just because time passes. It becomes a star because conditions create a lawful transformation pathway. Collapse becomes adjacent once constraints allow it. This is why some clouds never become stars. Time did not fail. Adjacency conditions fail. So adjacency is the deeper truth behind any history of the universe story. The universe's sequence is a walk through state space under lawful adjacency constraints. 10. The key discipline. Adjacency must be declared and auditable. Now we install the operational rule of the chapter. No adjacency without declared rule, declared condition, declared scope, and an audit path. If someone claims B is next after A, we demand answers. 1. What is the source state A defined within scope? 2. What is the candidate next state B defined within scope? 3. What is the adjacency type? Transformational, scale refining, overlap extension, boundary induced, coupling driven? 4. What is the rule basis that makes B reachable in one lawful step? 5. Under what conditions does this adjacency hold? 6. Is adjacency unique or are there multiple lawful next states? 7. What prevents illegal alternatives? Why are other candidates not adjacent? 8. How can another team replay the adjacency claim and agree? If this cannot be answered, the nextness claim cannot be certified. This is how we stop next from becoming a disguised time container. 11. A practical example. Weather forecasts as adjacency claims. A weather forecast says, tomorrow it will rain. In our discipline, that sentence is secretly an adjacency claim. It claims that a rain state is adjacent to the current atmospheric state under the declared model dynamics and boundary conditions. If the model yields multiple adjacent possibilities, rain or no rain, then the forecast must declare branching. It must not collapse it into certainty. If the model cannot produce rain from the current state under the declared transformation family, then rain is not adjacent, and the forecast is wrong, not because time went differently, but because adjacency was miscertified. So even everyday forecasting becomes clearer. It is about mapping adjacency sets under lawful transition rules, not invoking time as the cause of sequence. The rigor layer, the adjacency gate suite. Because nextness language is easy to fake, part 27 installs enforcement gates. Gate 1, adjacency certification gate. A nextness claim must present a lawful adjacency basis connecting source and target. Gate 2, rule declaration gate. The rule must be explicit. Transformation, refinement, extension, boundary update, or coupling update. Gate 3, Scope gate. Both states must be defined within the declared scope. If scope changes, that change must be declared unlicensed. Gate 4. Branching gate. If multiple adjacent next states exist, branching must be declared. No silent pruning. Gate 5. Auditability gate. There must be a replay path. Another auditor can reproduce why this target is adjacent. Gate 6. No time smuggle gate. Words like next, later, and after may not serve as primitive explanations. They must point to certified adjacency structure. These gates turn nextness into public structure. Firewalls against common smuggling tricks. This chapter blocks several predictable failures. Nextness by habit. It's next because that's how time goes. Refuse. Similarity mistaken for adjacency. It's next because it looks close. Refuse. Undeclared branch pruning. I'll just pick the obvious one. Refuse unless declared and justified. Hidden scope shift. Changing what counts as the state without admitting it. Refuse. Path selection disguised as fate. Treating one pathway as inevitable when multiple adjacencies exist. Refuse. Adjacency without a rule. Saying it follows without naming what makes it follow. Refuse. These firewalls are not about pedantry. They protect the foundations of ordering. What Part 27 installs as certification outputs. When Part 27 is installed, the framework gains concrete capabilities. Adjacency becomes the first ordered relation in dynamics, the minimal step relation that grounds after without time metaphysics. Nextness becomes a claim type that can be certified or refused, not a storytelling habit. Branching becomes lawful structure. Multiple possible next states are represented as structured possibility, not chaos. Ordering becomes a property of pattern relations. You can build order graphs from adjacency without assuming a background timeline. Dynamics becomes map-like. The future of a state is the set of lawfully adjacent targets under declared conditions, with pathways as sequences of adjacency steps. A bridge is open to the deepest bookkeeping. Across adjacency steps, what is preserved and what is generated. This last bridge is essential. Once you have next, you can finally ask what every serious science must ask. Across change, what remains and what appears? Refusal conditions. A nextness claim must be refused if it offers no declared rule that makes the target adjacent. It hides branching and pretends there is one unique next. It treats next as a temporal given. It confuses similarity with reachability. It changes scope silently. It cannot be replayed by independent auditors. Refusal is not negativity. It is the cost of honest public knowledge. A closing image. The map of possible next steps. Imagine you are in a city at night with a map. You stand at an intersection. You ask, what is next? The answer is not whatever time brings. The answer is, which roads connect from here under the rules of roads? Some roads are open, some are closed, some are one-way, some require a key, some cross a bridge with a weight limit, some lead to dead ends. That is adjacency. Now imagine the city is not streets but parent states, and the roads are lawful transformation rules, boundary updates, coupling obligations, domain extensions, and scale refinements. Then next becomes something you can certify. A road exists under conditions, within boundaries, with branching where roads split. That is the whole chapter in one image. Nextness is a road relation, not a time spell. Handoff to part 28. Now that adjacency is installed, dynamics becomes fully structured. We no longer say A then B because a timeline told us so. We say B is adjacent to A because a declared rule makes it reachable. Now, the deepest bookkeeping question arrives naturally. Across an adjacency step, across lawful change, what is conserved and what is generated? That is part 28, conservation and generation. What remains invariant through change, what must be accounted as loss, and what appears as new certified structure. Always, peace be upon you.